recorded. This is the Red Ticket Blues podcast. I am Brian Buckley. This is being recorded on May 11th to hit the internets on May 12th. You can always listen to this show and every other episode that's ever been made of the Red Ticket Blues podcast on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, YouTube, and Google Play. So this week, and remember to follow me on Twitter at BrianBuck13 and at Red Ticket Blues. So this week, our weekly Thursday talk guest is Joe Gannascoli. He is a Vito from The Sopranos, one of the most successful television programs in the history of television. He gets into New York City sports, him growing up in the New York City area, what it's like being on the set of The Sopranos and going through those seasons, the challenging role he had, and what he's up to now. So let's take a listen. You know him as Vito from The Sopranos, and he is the creator of Bottle Skins, Joe Gannascoli. Joe, thanks for coming on the Red Ticket Blues podcast.
Oh, my pleasure, Bill.
Yeah,
thanks.
No, it's my pleasure for having you. So before we get into everything, you're a Yankees fan, correct?
I am.
And I got to ask you, there seem to be a lot of people turning around because, you know, they won 2 games in a row. Do you think they're World Series champs, or do they still suck?
It's big news that they won 2 in a row, huh?
In some circles.
Yeah, I guess with this going on. So I'm sorry. What did you ask me?
So what do you think? You think they're still a pretty crappy team, or do you think they're putting things together going forward?
The
Yankees.
Yeah, they got too many question marks and age and injuries and I would like to see Greg Bird this year. Judge is not going to bring up just yet. Mateo. I don't know if we're going to crack the farm team open, but it's some good bright spots and some stuff that you can't wait till the contract's up and new blood.
Yeah, I think next year, I mean that's when you're going to see that's going to be a whole new team, all sorts of young players and whatnot. Because this year, I think, like you said, it's expiring contracts, it's old, it could be a wasted season. So, I wanted to ask.
Going to be up and down.
Exactly. I got to ask you a question here.
Yeah.
What do you, I, and Mike Francesa all have in common?
We like to eat?
Listen, no, we all spent some time at St. John's. Now you were at St. John's, and you're a big sports fan. I got to ask you, how did you go to basketball games all the time? Because that's when St. John's was one of the best teams in this entire country in the mid-'80s.
Yeah, I think I was there when I was there. Reggie Carter, I think, was the big name back then. I didn't listen. I lasted a year and a half in school. I wasn't cut out for college. I just wasn't me. Thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but I couldn't see myself in a regular 9-to-5 job. Not that a lawyer's 9-to-5, but that sort of restricted environment. So I didn't really last at St. John's, and it's even really hard for me to call it my alma mater. I mean, but if there's any school I'm connected to, it'd be St. John's,
Right. So, I mean, all right, so you didn't last at St. John's, but you got into acting. Now, I don't think there's any perfect time to get into acting. People get in at different ages and whatnot. How do you get into acting? Because, I mean, with me, I think of just somebody just sitting outside waiting to be an extra outside a big lot in New York City or in Los Angeles somewhere. So how do you jump in there, in case anyone's listening and wondering, how do I become an actor?
Well, I didn't go from college to acting. I was a chef. Mm-hmm. I was cooking.
But you're still cooking, correct?
I am, and it's not that a lot of cooking went on in my house, and my grandparents or watching my mother and stuff like that. My cooking background is sort of French, and that's I think from St. John's I went to go work at Lord and Taylor, and from Lord and Taylor I spoke to the executive chef that was cooking for the president of Lord and Taylor, and she got me a job in a restaurant in Manhattan, and I started off like all cooks or all people that start a restaurant business doing prep. They want to be in the kitchen. You start doing prep, and then you work your way up. And then I moved to New Orleans back in I'd say '81, and I lived there for almost 4 years. Right when the New Orleans craze was happening in the country and in New York. And that's how I got my start in cooking. And then I worked in Manhattan. I had restaurants in Brooklyn, and I got in trouble gambling. Gambled it away. I had a very successful restaurant with partners, and went to L.A. to. It's actually a very longer story than that, but went to L.A. to pursue the acting, and got out of. Well, I actually cooked in Los Angeles too. But that's how I wound up getting into
And
acting.
you'd always want to be an actor. I mean, it sounded like you were pretty involved in cooking, and I mean, it's something of a passion of yours. I mean, was acting always there, or was it sort of like, hey, what the hell, I'll go for this?
You know, it was never really a passion of mine. I mean, I am passionate about cooking because I'm always watching shows and, you know, reading about it, and, you know, I'm always interested in different cuisines. Like I said, my cooking background is French, but of course I know Italian, and I like, you know, all different cuisines. So acting was never a passion, but it was fun. I mean, it's a fun way to make a living. And, you know, I hustled and made my own breaks in acting, and, you know, I was in the right place and right time, and I guess for the Sopranos.
Yeah, I was reading that, I mean, I don't want to say an unlikely person, but I guess whatever. I mean, a very big movie star sort of pushed you in the right direction once you met him to get into The Sopranos.
Benicio?
That's right, Benicio del Toro. I mean, so how did that come about? How did he say, well, you know, I want to help this guy out. I want to push him. I mean.
Well, I didn't really meet him. The first movie I ever did was a movie called Money for Nothing, a true story about a guy who finds $1 million in the street. It was with John Cusack, Michael Madsen, Benicio del Toro, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and a young James Gandolfini, which I didn't get to work with. But I worked with Michael Madsen. And I don't even remember how I met Benicio because I didn't have any scenes with him. And maybe it was I became friends with him when we got back home to Los Angeles. We shot in Pittsburgh. And he was directing a film that he wrote, a short film, and he said, you know, I'd like to have you play the lead. And I was like, wow, yeah. And so I was the lead about this drug deal going on in a hotel room. And I worked with Matthew McConaughey and Valeria Golino and one or two other actors.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second here. You're working with all these guys, and I mean, are you a little starstruck? I mean, at the same time, I mean, a few years ago, you're working, you're doing what you like, but you're going into this different field, and all of a sudden, there are these, you know, top-notch movie stars you're working with. How was?
They didn't get, but this is back in 91, 92, so they weren't really. I mean, they were, you know, established, but they weren't like the breakout stars they are, you know, years ago. I mean, Oscar winners, and I guess both of them. So I guess we were all starting out, but they were certainly more advanced than I was in their career. And, but it was pretty cool. I mean, I had the lead, and you know, Matthew McConaughey was in movies, and so was Benicio. I think he had done James Bond already, and he did that movie. He was getting a cult-like figure status, you know. Benicio, and he's like, you know, just one of the coolest guys I know, you know, and it's so funny seeing him do these Heineken commercials because it's so him. I mean, it's so that was great. You know, I did that, and we remained friends, and I moved back to New York, and he helped me get into a movie that he was in called The Funeral, with directed by Abel Ferrara, and I was in the movie Basquiat. That's it, Basquiat. And the Soprano casting directors were casting that, and they wanted to meet me because they said, you know, you're in this movie, we don't even know who you are. So I went to go meet them, and they said, do you have an agent? I said, no. Well, they said, keep in touch with us every so often. We'll let you know if you're right for anything. And I was right for this role. It was a different character the first season, where I played just a bakery customer that Michael or Christopher throws me out of the bakery. And then they brought me back as Vito, which they've never done, you know, for anyone. You know, someone that was on it. So I got lucky in that respect. And then I had the idea to make my character gay from a book I was reading, and the only time they ever took a suggestion. And 2 years later, they did it and changed my life.
Right. So, just to put Benicio aside for a second, I just want to say, my wife is an enormous fan of Benicio del Toro. And interesting story, she went to the same high school as he did in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and he was actually expelled from that high school for mooning the principal. So I just thought,
I know.
Yeah. So I just want to let everyone know that in case I didn't tell that story on the podcast before.
So he grew up in Miami,
well,
right?
No, he grew up in Puerto Rico, but he probably spent some time, I think, later on afterwards, in Miami, I believe.
And his father's a lawyer.
I don't know everything about him, but my wife always loves telling that story. You mentioned, later on in the series that yes, it was revealed that your character is gay, and you read the book Murder Machine, and you suggested to director David Chase. Now, did you have second thoughts? I mean, it's one thing to read a book and say, wow, that's really interesting, and another to say, I'm going to put myself in this position right here. Did you think, am I the right thing here? Not that there's anything wrong with that, to steal a line from Seinfeld, but I'm just saying, we're going into a show, The Sopranos, with mobsters and machismo and lots of testosterone. So were you worried?
Yeah. I didn't suggest it to David himself. That would have been too ballsy. Okay. But there was writers that... there was a lot of different writers. I don't know, not a lot, maybe 4 or 5 different writers. And whatever writers wrote the episode, they were usually, watching the production. So this was a married couple, Robin Green and Mitch Burgess, that went on to write Blue Bloods. Oh. Created Blue Bloods. But so I now you don't want to do this in front of like the other actors.
Right, right.
I mean, you got to do it on the slide, because it's always a dicey thing. You're like, what are you trying to get? You know what I mean? People find objection to that. So I had to do it like on the slide, very where out of eyesight of anybody else, and to say, hey, I said to Robin, I'm reading this book, and this is sort of an interesting character about a guy that's in the mob and gay, and something you never see, and be interesting, and I'd be willing to do it, and that was it. I gave her the book, and nothing happened with it. That was season 3, and not till season 5 did they decide to do something with it. And she asked me, she called me up right before we went back to shooting, and she asked me the name of the book, and I was like, wow, they're thinking about it now. And then they started making changes throughout the year, or like, the script, they gave me a wife, which I said, that's kind of weird. And so things started happening. And when the scene came up for the security guard, it's not what I really actually had in mind, but, it was crazy. It's funny. I'll tell you a funny story. Is that, we all had our moles, because the crew gets the script first, and we would never get the script because they don't want any leaks.
Right.
So we always asked, what's going on in the next episode? Who's dying? Am I going? That was always your biggest fear, because, you're in a mob show. You're like week to week. Yeah. And they said none. So my guy said, no, you're good this episode. I said, oh, good, thank God. He goes, oh, but, there is something happening. I said, what is it? He goes, oh, you're blowing someone. So I said, what? And he said, yeah. I said, come on, I don't have to break my balls. So, sure enough, we get to do the read-through, and, everybody's breaking my balls. Stevie Van Zandt, Tony Sirico, and this and that and the other thing. And Jimmy took me aside and said, listen, if you feel uncomfortable about doing this, we'll go talk to David. And I said, it was kind of my idea, so I'm not going to say anything, but I just don't want to do it, and then just never, nothing else happens with it. So I guess the word got to, he says, well, we're just going to have this scene, but next year it's going to blow up. And I said, okay.
Were you worried at that point? Like, I mean, it's a lot. The world is a lot more progressive these days than it was back then. Were you worried? I mean, just about from people on the street. Like, I asked Twitter today about some questions to ask you, and I was a little hesitant of it just because of what exactly happened. And it was people asking about your specific character on on the show. I mean, were you worried about, going to the store and someone being like, "Oh, I saw what you did last episode"? I mean, did that ever enter your mind?
Well, you always got to have the jerk off,
Right.
questions and stuff like that. And then I just saw, a couple of them that asked you about it, and I immediately blocked them because I could see, jerk off's a jerk off. But I never really even thought about it. I thought about it for a second because, my friends are my friends. I'm from Brooklyn, and that's it. But also, working in restaurants in Manhattan, and I'm not talking about, pizzerias and fucking. By the way,
No, you could do whatever you want.
Yeah. So I was working in, upscale, French restaurants, and it's a big gay scene. Waiters either gay or actors or, both. So I didn't have a problem with that. And I also worked in an all-gay restaurant in Manhattan called Company. And this is when I was young. And we used to freak out my friends because they used to come and get me and we'd go out afterward. But I had such a good time in there because me and this other kid, Danny, in the kitchen were straight. And, back when I was 22, 23, I was 175 pounds. I was, I don't know if you saw pictures. If you see pictures of me younger, and probably most likely on Facebook, I was getting more ass in the toilet seat. So the waiters were always bringing in, girls, I guess they call them fag cakes, that are out with the gay guys, and whether it be hairdressers, this and that, and they were girls who were smoking hot. And they go, "Oh, we want you to meet Danny and Joe." And I go, and so I was constantly looking up for the gay restaurant. That was great. So, but I never had a problem with the gay scene. So it didn't really bother me that much. I mean, I did meet, after I popped my head up with the security guard, there were real guys that I know that all of a sudden wouldn't talk to me. Some of them were gay, and I used to see them in restaurants or in clubs. It gave me a dirty look.
They can't seem to separate the fact that was you being an actor. It's a different life. I mean,
yeah, well, they're ignorant people. So they're ignorant. So either I says, "Oh, it looks like they had a little situation. Maybe they were in a can and they had a little, situation. Maybe, usually that someone's really anti anything. They most likely have tendencies to be that person, whether it be prejudice, whether it be gay or whatever. I mean, they might even be on the fence. That's the way I always looked at it. If someone's really vocal about it and anti-something, is that they're trying to fight the fag or something.
Right. Let me ask you, so you were just talking about before, it's going to happen on a mob show. People are going to get hit. So what do you think about Vito's eventual demise? I mean, when you see that, what's going through your mind?
Well, I try to talk him out of it because I said, he doesn't, he's an earner and this and that, and I couldn't do it. I said, "No, you're going." And it's always, with any mob, it's always about the bottom line is money. And even though I was a big earner, now I started hurting him in the pocket because no one wanted to deal with them because he had me in the family. So the bottom line was money. I lasted 41 episodes. At that point, I said, listen, I had a prolific role. I mean, the first part of season 6 was all about me. I was either the episode was about me, and if I wasn't in that episode, they were talking about me. So I couldn't complain. I said, listen, I lasted this long. It's the first half. The second half, the show's gone. So, I lived with it. I dealt with it. Lived with it.
The last few seasons on the set. I mean, were people? The public's obviously asking, what the hell's going to happen here? You're even around in season 6. That's right, towards the end. I mean, was there a talk on the show what the hell's going to happen here? Does anyone have any idea at that point?
Well, I was, maybe at the last season when it shot, it was the talk. I was gone already. And, Twitter and Facebook weren't that big at then. I mean, it would have been...
No, it would have been people talking about it nonstop. There would have been theories everywhere, sources leak. I mean, it would have been everywhere.
Yeah, it would have been out of control. Although, I followed Mad Men or maybe Breaking Bad and Mad Men on Twitter as I was watching it. And as soon as something happened, boom, it was on Twitter. So it might have been speculation. Who would have had, blogs and this and that. It would have been. I probably would have got in trouble had it been around.
He,
Because I would have got like too involved with, fans. I'm sure.
right. The
But I wouldn't divulge anything because I never divulged. Even I didn't see the episode until it was on TV like everyone else. So you didn't know how it was going to play out, the music.
Interesting.
I knew, just through the read-through, but you know how they cut it stuff. So I was just as much a fan as everyone else when it came on TV.
Now, do you have any idea? Obviously, that it's not going to happen with the unfortunate passing of James Gandolfini, but was there an actual, was a movie in the makes? I mean, I was always heard yes, no. I mean, David Chase was really seemed to be always up in the air, especially with the end of the series. Was that ever a serious option, a movie, Sopranos?
I don't think so. I mean, I've never heard it, directly from him, but I don't think so because I think that, he would have liked to have seen done of like some fresh idea. And 86 hours.
86 hours.
Pretty much covered everything that he wanted to say. 86 episodes. So the only thing he could have done was a prequel, whereas how we all started off. And that's what sort of Boardwalk Empire did already, so you couldn't really do that.
Right, right. So, I mean, Sopranos, obviously, it's a life-changing experience for you, and I know you've been in other movies and pictures, but there's one that you turned down because of the castmate that you would have had in that movie. And you had it for your own personal reasons. So just tell us a little bit about that.
It was a film, and I'm sure it wasn't going to be a huge blockbuster. It was a small
Bronx
film.
Dahmer, that was the name of it, correct?
To do it. Bronx Dahmer?
The name of the movie, correct?
Yeah. Yes. And I agreed to do it, and then someone said it on Twitter. Said, "Hey, I just heard that you're going to be in this movie, and I look forward to seeing you in Lilo Brancato." And I went, "Lilo Brancato?" I said, "He's in it?" They said, "Yeah." And I called the producer. I said, "I just heard that Lilo Brancato's in it." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Listen, I you do what you have to do. I can't be in it because I know too many cops and I respect them. And
let me interrupt.
I wouldn't feel comfortable
just for one second. Anyone listening that doesn't know, Lilo Brancato starred in A Bronx Tale, and he went to prison for his involvement in the murder of an off-duty New York City police officer. Did 7 or 8 years. So I just want to jump in and let anyone know. I mean, he was involved in the murder of a police officer.
Right. So he didn't actually.
Exactly.
He was a junkie. And his girlfriend's father was a junkie, and they go to rip someone off, and a neighbor hears the commotion. Turns out it was a cop, and the guy, the Lilo's friend, shot him, and fatally, and it was tragic. So, well, he didn't actually pull the trigger.
Right. He was convicted of burglary.
He's made good on
burglary. He was convicted of, yeah.
Right, but my thought was, listen, you go to rob someone with a gun.
Yeah.
Anything could have went wrong. The kid's, the house is there. An old lady could have walked in. The kid's mother could have, what I mean?
Exactly.
It's just, and you just panic, boom, you shoot them. So you're part of that. So, it's just like being, two drunk guys in a car and the guy driving kills someone.
Right.
I mean, he just is responsible. So, and he's turned his life around. He's a model, inmate, from what I heard, and he's helping people, think about their actions before they do it, which is all great. But again, I just felt uncomfortable and said, I'm not going to do it, and that's what happened.
So, I mean, did your friends and family think you were saying, that's a payday there, or did they say, well, you know what, we respect the reasons why you did this?
They understood, my wife was, didn't really get it at first, but I said, I don't, however you feel, I don't really care. I mean, I really decided.
I think it's a tough spot. I mean, for someone to put in, I understand I think both you guys handled it well because, I mean, you had an exchange on Twitter about it, and it wasn't some knockout dragging fight that we're used to on Twitter. I mean, both of you guys were quite cordial to each other, and I mean, I don't know. I don't know where I'd stand on this. I respect you a ton for doing that, especially that's a payday sitting there involved in. I don't care how big or small the movie is; it's a payday. And I know he's also tried to turn around his life. But you know what? When you have as many cop friends as you do, then I can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. But again, I wasn't going to get into like a war of words with the kid. I just told him how he felt. He was respectful. Had he gone a different way, then I don't know how I would have reacted. Well, I probably do know how I would have reacted, but he understood. And, I said, good luck, and, it is what it is, and, we have to stand by, the choices we make in life. And so that's how we left it off. I mean, the news got a hold of it because I guess they follow him and then sort of exchange and did a little story on it. But, they had a little story about it in the, I guess on Facebook, and it just really picked up a head of steam, and every cop across the country was, thanking me and said about time someone supports us and this and that. And I said, hey, listen, you guys, get abused enough. You're on camera. Everyone's looking to provoke you. You're on camera. Everyone's got a camera. Just, you're under so much pressure. You're like a sitting duck there. People just, it's unimaginable. So to be a cop, and it's got to freak someone out to going to work every day with that target on them. So I wanted to just support him.
No, and it's a very admirable thing, like I said. So, Joe, after Jimmy passed away, and I read something in Bob's Blitz, which is a well-known pop culture website in the tri-state area, regarding a little back and forth with former co-star Steve Schirripa, all surrounding the death of James. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's a thing that actually, really bothered me. And Steve and I were, pretty friendly at one time on the show. We hung out, we talked a lot, and as I got more to do on the show and a little busier, I wasn't really that accessible. And maybe Steve, there was a known thing about Steve. He was like, the inside joke among castmates was like, he has a big bowl of ice cream in front of him, and he's always looking at yours, So I think he sort of resented how I got, busy on the show, and he's that type of guy. He doesn't want to see people do well or get ahead or something like that. A little envious. So, when what happened with Jimmy, he gave a story to the Post, but the Post had come out and said all these derogatory things about Jim, what he was eating and his past habits, which has been well documented. And I felt that was like a low time to do it. I mean, Jimmy had gone to Afghanistan or Iraq to visit the troops with Tony Sirico, Paulie Walnuts, and he did the special on HBO about the veterans. I just thought it was a low blow. I called him up the next day. I called up the writer. And I unleashed him. I really got into him, and he was giving an interview to the Post, and I'm saying, or he was on the radio. I forgot how it went down, but I was saying, how is this guy not trashing the Post of what they do to him, and he's talking to them, and he was on. And I don't know how I came out with it. Maybe I did it in a radio interview. Maybe I was did it on social media. I forget. Mm-hmm. But so he got wind of it, and he planted this story with the Post coming out after me. And this is before Jimmy was not even buried, which was classless in itself. And I had said all along, when I got interviewed, I said, listen, I was in closest friends with Jimmy, but he came to my wedding, he spoke, he came with his son. He came to my restaurant, did an appearance when he was sick as a dog. And he approached me when he said, listen, if you're not comfortable doing this part in The Sopranos when my character took the turn, let's go talk to David and, I'll go with you, which I thought was really, nice of him. So those two things, I had a little connection with. I always remember that, and I always knew what kind of guy he was. So I always said that. I wasn't close to him, but I brought up those things and just said he was just a tremendous guy. And so stupid says I'm grandstanding. And you talk about grandstanding. I mean, you go on a national show. At the time, he was on TV, national, and you go 45 minutes. And then, of course, at the funeral, he's like showing his, he comes out crying and he's facing the cameras. I mean, he's very predictable. He always knew where to be with the camera is, behind Jimmy, or when he was on the red carpet. He knew exactly where to get his camera on. He's never turned down a camera shot. And we all know that. So Bob's Blitz put this all together. And, of course, that Sunday, he was in there promoting something in the retail or the rental section. I forgot what he was promoting, but it was just convenient that it was that week, and anybody reading about The Sopranos was just thirsty for anything to do with Jimmy. So I'm just glad that Bob exposed him for the two-faced guy he is, and that was it. I'm happy I sleep well at night.
So I don't think you guys are still you're not talking these days, right? That still remains an issue.
I haven't seen him. It's one of the reasons why I would never go to the Garden. And he goes, he's got.
It's true. He's always sitting front seat.
Yeah, he's always there, and he does things for the Garden. I get that, the Garden of Dreams and so on. He does know nothing about hockey when the Knicks are tanking. He's at the Ranger games, and he's got his stupid fat face on the scoreboard.
So we were talking about the Yankees earlier. You're also a big Giants fan, correct?
I am a huge Giants fan. When I was a kid, it was all Yankees. I lived and died with the Yankees, and I'm like the kid classic fan. Italians follow the Yankees because of Tony Lazzeri and DiMaggio, and then Rizzuto, and then of course the Giants because they played in Yankee Stadium. There were no Jets back then, and then the Rangers. Knicks play a stupid brand of basketball, so I don't really bother with them. But Giants are a team. I guess because it's only 16 games, and I love the preseason, so that makes it 20, and then hopefully playoffs and 22, 23, 24 games.
So there's a new coach this year. Coach, what are you looking for? I mean, Coughlin's been there forever, and now McAdoo's there. So how you feeling about this season? I mean, I know it's a little early to start breaking down the X's and O's of the Giants, but
don't believe me. I live for the draft.
Okay.
I live for the free agency. I'm pay close attention to the practice squad, who's coming, who's going. Every year I think they kill the draft, and no different this year. McAdoo, well, first of all, I'm a huge Coughlin fan, and I was sorry to see him really go, and I think he had a year or two left in him, but I know things have to change, it is what it is. So, okay, we have McAdoo, which is, I think he's a bright kid. Hopefully he's one of those bright young minds in football. He retained some of his coaches, which is good. He brought in some new ones. I'm curious to see whether a new strength and conditioning coach does anything for the injuries that happened in preseason. I know that Lings Darkwood just got hurt in the minicamp, so here we are with that again. But I actually feel like there's going to be, just because it's going to change, that culture of guys getting hurt, I think is not going to be there this year.
You're also a big fan of Annie Apple already, I noticed on Twitter.
Yeah, she's done a great job with her son. I love what she said about the Rolex.
Yeah, definitely.
That was tremendous. I think that Sterling Shepard is going to be a tremendous player. He's really been brought up well, and that's the new kind of Giants, that they want guys that were captains, that have character. I don't think they want any more issues of Will Hill and the Plax guys. Although I love Plax because he came up big in the
big
minus 17 game in Green Bay. But I think they're done with that type of guys.
Okay, so Joe, you were just talking about the Giants. You're obviously a sports fan. We talked about the Yankees earlier, and someone that I always see you talking about along with, it seems like almost half of Twitter all the time, is Mike Francesa, the man who gets us the sports any way that he can. And you have a relationship with RN's Funhouse, who seems to he's doing God's work in a sense, but also making Mike Francesa's life a miserable hell to a certain extent. So tell me about the days or how long you've been listening to Francesa and why you listen to the man in the first place.
That's good. That's a good way to put it. He's doing God's work. So, I've been listening to Fan Tour since its first inception back in, I guess, 87, 88. Of course, sports radio, for me, goes back to when John Sterling and Art Rust had a show on. But someone had the idea to, make it 24 hours, 7 days a week, and which is great for a hardcore sports fan. And I listened to Pete Franklin, and I guess none of the people really stand out back then. And I had gone to maybe live in New Orleans, and I lived in Los Angeles, so I actually lost touch with the fan. I'm a big Steve Summers fan, and Joe Benigno when he was overnight. There's not many people I do like. You lived in sports for 45 years. You hear a lot of announcers, you hear a lot of talk shows, and you have your favorites, and then the ones that are doing they don't have a voice for radio, or they're doing shtick, which annoys me. Yeah, so I was never a big Russo and Francesa fan. I never really got that whole thing. I thought Russo was doing shtick to rile up listeners. I know he's definitely a diehard Giants fan. I get that, but some of the antics, I wasn't really crazy about, but it is what it is. And when then Francesa went on his own, now I had met Francesa down in Florida for the Super Bowl. He was standing outside a restaurant. It was very popular. I was friendly with he was called Monterano's, and I was friendly with the chef. And I said, there's like a 2.5-hour wait. It was like a very popular restaurant between athletes and celebs. I said, can you get the guy in? He's there with his friend. I think it was the guy from Mulcahy's. I said, can you get him in? So I got him in, took a picture with him actually. And, but only like the last, 5, 6, 7 years, he started just rubbing me wrong way with the way he was treating people,
basically
bullying.
Since he went on his own.
Since he went on his own, I'd say, yeah. And he's so arrogant but smug in his predictions that it's become sort of a funny thing that RN has picked up about, and time after time he's proven himself wrong. He should be like a weatherman. But, listen, sports is the ultimate reality show, so there's no way of really predicting it. I mean, I could understand someone saying, hey, this is what I think is going to happen, this is what should happen on paper, this is, how I see it playing out. But you never know, and you never do. But when you do it so smug and then you deny it, or say that's not what I said, or not what I meant, or you took it the wrong way, or you're a nerd, I mean, this is, ridiculous. So it's some of these things, like the Appalachian State, remember, that's Phila from Michigan, and, and then Appalachian just winds up beating them. But there's so many of them. So that's the thing what gets me about Francesa, and it's always fun to listen to RN because he captures it all, and it's great.
It's funny, I'm sort of conflicted. Like, one day I'm like, you know what? I mean, he talks all day long, every week, and, people are going to mess up. But then there's the other part of me that thinks, I've been listening to Mike forever, and he just denies when he's wrong, and now he's finally being held accountable. So I'm I go back and forth, but, I mean, I watch the videos every time, obviously.
Yeah, and he does it the way he edits it and puts it together. It's great.
It's great.
And it's not easy. He talks 6.5 hours. You could hear it in his voice when he's tired. I know when he nodded out. I mean, he probably has sleep apnea. I don't know if he sleeps with the machine. I had it myself. I was nodding out at red lights in a car, and thank God I got it diagnosed and now sleep with the machine. And maybe he does now, and maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But it seemed like he just nodded out during the day, and then just to deny it, we're so here, and it's such folly for everyone else. I mean, it's the first thing they mentioned. He had this thing with DiPietro, and then Levitard got involved,
right.
And that's the first thing they mentioned is the nodding out. Jim Norton and what's the guy on Sirius?
Opie and Anthony. Well, it's Opie.
Opie and Anthony. One of them got fired, but the other guy, they have a ball with this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's really funny, as do other people. So, hey, listen, the guy's well paid. He's doing something right. But I don't know if all of his listeners are that cerebral is putting it in a nice way.
So you are right now, you are the creator of Bottle Skinz. Tell everyone exactly what Bottle Skinz is.
Well, I have a water bottle, $5 water dispenser in my house. I was looking at it and said, how come there's no, I could put a cover on that and tribute the Giants. And I went online and looked, and there was nothing like it. And if you Google NFL products, there's everything under the sun has got, team on it, logo on it. But not that. So I called up Pat Hanlon from the Giants. He directed me to the NFL licensing. And they set me up with a company that they were dealing with, where they're in the licensing business, and they have all kinds of new and cool products, and they're always looking for new ideas. So they took on my product, and we found out that, the cover also fits on a propane tank, and then it fits on the back of a chair, and girls started wearing them as two tops or skirts, and they put them on a planter and had all these different uses. And I've done a lot of trade shows with them, the licensing and tailgate show, the NFL show, NHL show. We just did the hardware show. So a lot of these, I got them in Home Depot. They're on Lowe's right now. BJ's is going to take them in. Tomorrow I'm doing a big Ace hardware store in Long Island. They have 30 stores, and they're going to be national with Ace Hardware. So it's just picking up, steam and popularity. My goal is to sell 1 million skins in a year, and it's going to have to take a lot of skins. But, I sold quite a bit last year.
That's great.
And it's only going to get better. And it's really cool. I mean, you love sports, and then you have a product. My biggest thrill was taking it to Giant Stadium and seeing it, go on their water cooler in the weight room. I mean, that was like no better.
That's great, and that's a great idea too. It must have been a pain in the ass. Was it a pain in the ass working with the NFL to actually get the licensing down with this, or did they like the product?
No. It was a snap because they directed me to the people that they deal with already, and boom.
There we go.
Now, had I done it alone, it would have been very hard. I mean, had to do it. They don't like to deal with someone that just has one product. To go all to the shows, to meet all the demands, it's been perfect.
Very good. So, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on the Red Ticket Blues podcast. But before you go, I have 3 quick questions to play us out. You ready? What is your favorite dish to cook?
Linguine with crab sauce.
Okay, all right. Number 2, what is the...
But I'm a sauce guy. I was a saucer, my specialty is sauces. That's what I like.
What is the best mafia movie, and I know you're a book reader, so what you could say either or, best mafia movie or book ever?
Scarface with Paul Muni.
Okay, all right. And number 3, who is the most famous athlete you've ever met?
Muhammad Ali.
Very nice. When was that?
He came to the studio, and I had 3 idols. Jackie Robinson is my all-time most admired. Muhammad Ali I love, and LT is the guy I most want to be. I don't know how to put them. I'd say Jackie Robinson is the most admired. Ali was the most charismatic, and they could back it up. And then LT was, because he was a giant and was just revolutionized the position. So those are my 3. But Muhammad Ali came to the studio with his daughter, and I got to take a picture with him. And he actually, he's a joker. And he was hardly himself. I think he was eating a cookie. But he took a picture of me, and he put the horns up behind my head, but you could barely see his finger. But he always had that sense of humor. He was always like, a jokester. So that was my most thrilling. And, of course, LT did an episode of The Sopranos. Right. So that was, amazing.
That's a good job out of you. 2 out of 3. That's not bad.
Yeah, I'll never get to meet Jackie.
Yeah. So he is Joe Gannascoli. You can follow him on Twitter at Joe R. Gannascoli and find Bottle Skins at BJ's, Home Depot, Lowe's, and Ace. Joe, thanks for coming on the Red Ticket Blues podcast.
Outstanding job. I enjoyed it.
All right, man. I appreciate it. So I'm gonna post this on Thursday, and I'll at you on Twitter. All right.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thank you. See you.
So that's Joe Gannascoli. I want to thank him for coming on the podcast. Great guest, lots of insight to what it's like to be on the Sopranos set, what he's up to now, and obviously the world of sports and our old friend Mike Francesa. So very, very good stuff. Remember, you can always listen to this show and all the other shows on iTunes, TuneIn, Radio, Stitcher, YouTube, and Google Play. That's the Red Ticket Blues podcast. And follow me on Twitter at BrianBuck13 and at Red Ticket Blues. Subscribe, like the show on Facebook, leave a 5-star rating. I've given you like 17 commands. I hope you can at least do 50% of them. So with all that being said, I'm out of here.